We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Ohio Governor Mike DeWine signs into law constitutional carry legislation. Now, what does that mean for legislation for the Second Amendment across the United States? And what is the present situation for those who wish to exercise their Second Amendment rights? Well, to join us on this, we're joined by Liberty Nation's editor-at-large, James Fight. Welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Mark.
So what does this new legislation mean in terms of who can and can't carry, and under what conditions does it operate?
All right. It's such a short question, Mark, but bear with me a moment. It has kind of a long answer. Now, this new law changes a few things for Ohio. As of right now, and until this law goes into effect in June, anyone hoping to carry a concealed weapon in public needs to be at least 21 years old, and that's not going to change, and hold a concealed carry license. That, of course, is changing. The license costs money and time in a couple of ways, making it yet another barrier for people who may have economic issues, financial issues, keeping them back from or getting in the way of them exercising their Second Amendment right and, dare I say, duty as a citizen to protect themselves and their families. And that is, of course, there's an application process, which is paperwork and time. There's an application fee of $15. There's the background check. And that, of course, that in the license itself is another $67 or more, depending on the background check. There's the time for this whole bureaucratic process to go. And then, of course, also, in order to get the license, you must show proof that you've completed a minimum 8-hour training course, which is generally another $100. That's another thing that can vary.
Now, does that training have to be with somebody who is specified
yes, no,
by the state?
That is you have to train with a certified firearms instructor. But I mean, look, this is not a cheap right to exercise, right? You have to buy a firearm. You have to buy ammunition to feed the firearm. You do need to train with it, whether you're required to take a course or not. And that's either burning through ammo in the backyard, if you will, or paying for range time. Now, the license will still be an option for people, but of course, the constitutional carry law means that you don't have to have it. The caveat to that is, obviously, that's not a Wild West free-for-all. To use kind of a cliched term, you have to still obviously be able to pass a background check. Like if you're not legally allowed to carry a gun, constitutional carry is not going to change that. And if you carry out you commit the, let's call it cliche and stereotypical liquor store robbery, there's no Second Amendment or constitutional carry argument that can save you. Now, the other big thing this changes for residents of Ohio is the responsibility of armed citizens when it comes to interactions with the police, Mark. So let's say you're driving in Ohio and you have a gun. Right now, if you're pulled over, you are obligated by law to immediately, or at least as soon as possible, disclose to the officer that you are carrying a concealed weapon. But failing to do this is a first-degree misdemeanor, punishable by up to 6 months in jail, a $1,000 fine, and of course, the suspension of the license, which without constitutional carry is the only thing that gives you permission from the state to actually defend yourself in public with deadly force if needed.
So there's a lot of critics of this legislation in Ohio, and they say that it will make the state more dangerous for residents and specifically for law enforcement. And I think that's kind of what they're alluding to when it's about you don't have to disclose this to an officer who pulls you over. But I'm really interested to hear the facts on this, Jim, that back up their assertions, if there are any. What do the numbers say?
When I look at this, my source for these numbers is I go to the Officer Down Memorial page, which tracks officers killed in the line of duty across the nation. This is a great resource for this. And of course, to honor these fallen officers. Now, in 2021, there were 59 officers killed across the nation by gunfire, not counting, there were 62 total, but I'm not counting the 3 from Puerto Rico. This is just mainland U.S. 14 of those were killed in constitutional carry states. 45 were killed in states that do not have constitutional carry. And of those 45, 16 were killed in states that this year went constitutional carry or seem poised to very quickly go constitutional carry. And in fact, something that just occurred to me is the state of Texas. Of those 14 constitutional carry states, constitutional carry state officer deaths, 6 of those were from Texas. Now, at the end of the year last year, Texas went constitutional carry, so those actually probably belong in that second list.
Okay, and how many states in total now have a version of constitutional carry?
Ohio made the 23rd state.
Okay, so it's a fairly even split between the two. Okay,
Pretty close, yeah.
now is this a growing movement or a shrinking one, and why would that be? Whichever the answer is.
All right. Well, like I just said, Ohio made the 23rd state,
Yeah.
Which is nearly half the country, and that is not an insignificant little factoid, that half the country part. We saw several states go constitutional carry in 2021. In January, I wrote about, for Liberty Nation, I wrote about the state of constitutional carry in 2022 and how there were, at that time, 21 states. And I gave a list of 5 states that were poised to take the plunge. And in 2 months, 2 of those states have done so, Alabama and Ohio. Now, still on the list are Georgia, Florida, and Nebraska. And I still predict that relatively soon they will join the list of constitutional carry states. As for this being a trend, a significant trend, we have to look at where we are politically in the country. In the 2020 election, we saw 30 of the 50 states back Trump, despite Biden's win. There are currently 28 states with Republican governors. Republicans control 61 individual chambers of state legislation, compared to Democrats' 37, with 1, Alaska's House of Representatives, stuck in a power struggle between. And Republicans hold trifectas, so that's governor, House, and Senate, or whatever the state's version of House and Senate happen to be, in 23 states, compared to just 14 for Democrats. That trend, so this trend of going constitutional carry has grown fairly rapidly in the last couple of years. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And the numbers and my gut both tell me that growth is not over.
That's of course assuming that the states that vote or tend to go Republican also tend to go with more expanded gun rights.
Right, which for the most part has been the trend.
Yeah, I believe there are a couple of exceptions here and there, but certainly that's the trend. Now, we also know that gun sales, and I guess more importantly, new gun owners, which is the more interesting part, I guess, this is on the rise. And part of this increase began during the George Floyd death-inspired riots, with folks wanting to protect themselves from the mob, pretty much. Right. And it seems that part of this increase also comes as a result of a seemingly anti-Second Amendment administration being in place. As in, a lot of people, they want to purchase guns, become a gun owner before any moves from the federal government cracks down on it. What do you make of that? What's your analysis?
Well, you're absolutely right, I think, Mark. Look, cities burning across the nation for whatever cause is scary. And people who have never thought about, like, this isn't necessarily anti-gun folks, although I'm sure some people change their opinion there, but I mean, people that just go about their lives and they never think about self-defense or crime happening to them, right? This is always something that happens to someone else. They're never worried about a complete societal breakdown because, well, you know, this is modern times and we're civilized people and that would never happen. Famous last words for how many civilizations, Mark?
Tell that to Vladimir Zelensky.
Right. But, you know, things like this, things like the George Floyd inspired riots, I don't want to call them the George Floyd riots, but
of course.
The ones inspired by this, that was a wake-up call for a lot of people. You couldn't, unless you just ran off in the woods and unplugged completely, you could not hide from that news. So got people thinking, and it was like, yeah, hey, look, I need to be proactive about the defense of myself and my family and maybe even my community. Now, as for the anti-gun administration, and I'm not going to use any weasel words. Look, the Biden campaign released his, how did he title it? His plan to end the epidemic of gun violence or something to that effect. I called it the Biden war on guns. Yeah, it's scary for anybody that cares about the Second Amendment. We're talking about, you know, magazine capacity bans, an actual full-on and this time permanent federal so-called assault weapons ban, which is to say just a ban on most semi-automatic weapons.
Which are most weapons other than revolvers or single shot rifles,
most,
I believe.
Well, right, yeah. Or Basically, I mean, you could make the argument even that it's not technically by the mechanics of the firearm semi-automatic, and they're not included in the legislation. But you could even make the argument that most revolvers is a semi-automatic weapon, because if it's if it's not a single action revolver, you can just keep pulling the trigger and it'll keep firing until you run out of bullets. So, but that just goes to show the lack of actual firearms knowledge and understanding in the people trying to make these laws, which is scary in of itself. But look, Democrats are and have always been great advertisers for firearms, right? Because, hey, if you're on the fence about something, Mark, and you're like, yeah, maybe I don't know. I mean, that's like $500 to $800 or maybe more. Man, sure, yeah, I'd like to have the right, but I don't need it right now. And then I say, hey, man, January next year, you're no longer going to be able to do this. What are you going to do? You're going to run out and buy it as fast as you can.
Yeah, I believe in sales terms, it's called the fear of loss factor.
Yeah. That's so. I mean, that's absolutely a factor. Of course, with the new firearms owners, I think probably the civil unrest was the larger contributor. I'm sure there were a lot of people who were on the fence that were like, hey, if they're going to ban these guns, I want to get one now. But also you've got a lot of people that already have these guns, and they're like, well, man, if I want another one, now's my chance.
Well, it certainly does seem that constitutional carry is trending upwards. And although we're not at Mad Max Thunder Road times just yet, we will be reporting on this as we go along. James Fight, thank you ever so much.
Hey, thanks, Mark.
After this short break, we're talking liberty. What's happening in Florida, and what's the spin machine doing right now? We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fight for freedom.
Daily tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I
others.
can do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on. I'm gone.